We are going through the papers this morning. We have the writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth and the author and journalist Suzanne Holder. Welcome back to both of you. Candice, let's start with the HMRC, shall we? A shambles, according to the Mail. How they've gone from gold standard to an utter mess.
Yeah, so this is very interesting. So it's a special report in the Daily Mail. They spoke to a former VAT inspector who's saying he's just seen the quality of service really decline in HMRC since he first began working there about 40 years ago. And what he puts it down to is that customers just can't get hold of people to speak to them about their tax issues. He said one of this is working from home, and that's one of the things that people say about working from home is you can't always route people to the right people when they need to speak to them. He said, you know, the closing down of the local tax centres, tax advice centres. He said this reliance on chatbots, which people find so frustrating. Yeah. And he said loads of people now, I mean, they've got, 2 weeks left to file. And he said they just like the waiting lists are so long. I mean, people just aren't getting emails answered. They're not getting calls through. He said it's really appalling. And he said the level of training that people are getting now is just not good enough to be handling these very complex tax inquiries.
I suppose you'd agree with a lot of that, Eamonn.
Well,
it's not news to you, is it?
Not news to me. You know, pick up the phone. You can't even pay them money.
Oh, really?
You can say, look,
they don't even want your money.
I owe you money. When do you want this money? Oh, we'll get back to you. You just wait.
It's like we spoke about in the last hour, though, when we were bringing back to the post office issue. You do actually think these people are slaves to, like, computers and IT systems and systems that aren't working. They've got rid of people to streamline it, and actually it's people doing the job is what you need. And there's a point, this person here who's kind of whistleblowing on the whole situation says he was trying to get some kind of feedback from his manager, his line manager, didn't get any feedback, but he did get an email from him saying that they should start putting pronouns after their signature on emails. And you just think, well, yes, you're just wasting time there, aren't you, really, with all that?
But just a shout out to everybody who's putting together their tax returns. It's an awful time of year, isn't it? Not only is it January and miserable, but tax returns were horrid.
One of the worst things, you talk about office reorganisation and whatever, about 15 or 20 years ago, someone took it into their heads there should never be a separate office for you if you are the boss.
Oh, yes.
There shouldn't
open
be like
plan.
a bosses or open plans. What a pile of absolute...
So you can't have any private conversations, You can't kind of deal with a manager situation or a difficult member of staff without everybody earwigging, just for openness.
Absolutely.
Just because people are nosy, that's what that is.
I wonder if this is why people like working from home as well, because people like to have a bit of privacy, you know, and all these open plan offices, which I've only... Yes, people don't like it. They find it disruptive and noisy as well.
And people sometimes do talk to you a lot when you're trying to work, and that's not good either.
Yeah, chatting about, what did you watch on TV last night? None of that. See, look at us. We sound like we're in favour of working from home. We won't get much support for that.
But surely that's part of the issue with the HMRC as well, that a lot of outsourcing to people from home who aren't in the office and aren't... And then how many times do you try and ring anybody who, I can't deal with it, I'm working from home, I can't open that attachment.
You hear the dog barking in the background. Do you want to go to the Sun now, Susan?
Yes.
This is a really tragic...
Terrible.
Probably should have started on it. I woke up to see this story this morning. It's on the Mail front page of the website. And beggars belief, really, that a little boy died from starvation in 2024.
Incredibly distressing, and I won't go into too much detail because it is too distressing. But, yeah, the timeline seems to be that this little boy was alive before Christmas. His mum and dad had a row. The mum left. And obviously there was some social services ongoing situation with the family. So social services then came round on January the 2nd. The father, who was in his 60s, was seen over Christmas. They came round, didn't get an answer on January the 2nd, came round again on January the 4th, didn't get an answer. And by January the 9th, then 5 days after the second visit, where they got no response, they got in and found that dad had unfortunately died of a heart attack, and the little boy, left alone with no other interaction from any adult, had starved.
But why is this the fault of social service?
Well, that is a question. So
presumably this was a vulnerable child if they were already making house calls.
They were obviously making house calls, and the mum, Sarah, who's 43, has said if social services had done their job, Bronson, the little boy, would still be alive. What isn't explained is why the mum didn't have any access or see the boy all over Christmas or at any point in January either. It's not mentioned. We don't know.
And it's no surprise, I don't think, that the Sun newspaper have used as their main picture a photograph of Bronson in a children in need set of pyjamas, wearing pudsey. Obviously, he was a little child in need himself.
Absolutely.
A real tragedy, that story.
Candice, you have a story which is about women's health issues, putting women's health issues first. The Health Secretary, who's a woman called Victoria Atkins, has pledged money for research into women's health issues, saying they've been overlooked.
Yes.
But she pledges the grand total of 50 million quid, which is pittance.
Well, it probably is, you're right. I mean, especially it is true that women's health is poorly represented in medical trials. I mean, things like women's heart attacks, they're often not diagnosed early enough because women present very differently to men when they're experiencing a heart attack, and doctors haven't really been trained to recognise that. And then things like endometriosis, for instance, I mean, that's not very well understood. Postnatal care, which is such a big issue for me because I saw so many women when I started having children having poor care after they had babies, and especially when, 1 in 20 will get things like postnatal depression. I mean, I think that this is really important, that she is placing an emphasis on this, but I agree with you, is £50 million enough to do that, to sort of correct this historical imbalance?
I think maternity care would be very different, wouldn't it, if men had babies? I think.
Well, they're saying it's more dangerous to have a baby now than at any other time.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
No,
you've got a beautiful bump.
No, but this is a real, I'm passionate about this, and I've spoken a lot about it, so yes.
But this issue also goes further than what are considered to be, women's issues of whether it's to do with periods or birth or endometriosis or those sort of things. I mean, I've actually looked it up because I thought I remembered it and I was right. Much of modern medicine is based on research done on male bodies, and in the US, women were not required to be included in clinical research until 1993.
No.
Yes.
I listened to a podcast which explained that sleeping pills were being trialled on men, and that there was this outbreak of incidents in the US where women were just crashing in the morning, driving into what are those little post boxes that you have at the end of your drive in the States with the... What do you call those? I don't know. And all these women were crashing into them, and eventually it emerged that the dosage for women was far, far too high.
Well,
They just hadn't trialled it.
And of course, it's
on women.
outrageous to say it now. But men and women are different. Biological sex is important. Our reactions to all sorts of things. And you're right about heart attacks. My mum had a heart attack a couple of years ago, a very mild one. Had no idea, didn't realise that I've got terrible heartburn. And I got
exactly the same as my mum.
I was advising her on what to do about heartburn. It never occurred to me that actually what she'd had was a heart attack, because the awareness isn't there. So if nothing else, maybe the awareness, the money might not go that far, but the awareness does need to be raised about all those things.
I mean, it's in so many areas. I mean, even at the paediatric level, they say that little girls with autism, for instance, are often diagnosed a lot later because they tend to hide their symptoms more. I mean, there's just so much that we have to look at. I mean, it's amazing to me that it's only now that people are actually starting to focus on it.
And just as we're starting to say it, we're being told that actually we're all the same, it doesn't matter what, and you can present as what you want and you don't have to say what you are, when actually, biologically, it makes a huge difference to your medical care.
Of course.
We're seeing a huge difference to security around the world because of what's going on in Gaza, because of Ukraine, because of the Red Sea crisis. Candice, tell us more.
Well, this is basically, it's an opinion piece in the Times. Roger Boys, and he's sort of looking at the Davos conference this year, and he's saying how, I mean, most of it is just going to be talking about this unfolding crisis in the Red Sea, and is it going to lead to a greater global crisis, which is what so many people are saying. I mean, these Houthis are destabilising the global world order. I mean, you've seen the US and the UK saying that their strikes on the Houthis are going to de-escalate the crisis. But could it escalate it? It could.
Yeah, of course it could.
It easily could.
Well, it certainly seems as though it hasn't done anything to improve the situation at all.
No.
And the implications and all of that on, here we are with our inflation going up unexpectedly this morning. Will this all see us going backwards in 2024?
Well, it could.
To get on top of the cost of living crisis.
I know.
There's also a drugs crisis, the worst drug shortages ever, Suzanne.
Yes. So basically, they are kind of claiming. I'm just trying to find it because there's so many things here now. I've lost
the time.
So there's big shortages for all sorts of drugs, including diabetes drugs, cancer treatments.
That's right.
Hormone replacement therapy.
And they're putting it down to all sorts of global pressure and manufacturing difficulties, missing key ingredients. Not at any point in this article in the Times does it mention Brexit, but anecdotally I have spoken to a lot of people who work in medicine who tell me that since Brexit, whether that's a coincidence or not, there has been a lot more difficulty getting things. We were at the Christie Hospital in Manchester not long ago, and they told us since Brexit they're having great difficulty getting parts for the scanner. So one of the scanners was down completely because they couldn't fix it, and they were using the word Brexit. So yeah, that's what's going on. The Department of Health and Social Care, however, say we do not recognise this as a problem. We have well-established processes to prevent, manage and mitigate medicine shortages. So they are trying to reassure us, but obviously it is very, very worrying that things, whether it's diabetes, cancer treatments, hormone replacement, but things that people need to be on and shouldn't be breaking off from are in short supply.
Well, you hear stories about people meeting in car parks and trading HRT medicines because, you know, there's just a shortage and women are driven to that.
I know people who've bought things off the internet. I mean, I wouldn't for a minute. I mean, I've never been on HRT, so it's not something that I know how difficult or easy it is to get personally. But I know people who've bought things off the internet. I'm like, well, surely that's a huge risk.
If you're desperate, you know, people are driven to desperate measures.
They are. I mean, I know someone personally who has to take oral hormones for the rest of his life. I mean, he'll be a permanent patient of the NHS, and to think that he could not get those drugs when his quality of life can be so permanently affected, it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary.
OK. Well, Candice and Suzanne are going to be back in 45 minutes' time, so we look forward to that. For the moment, thank you both very much indeed. If you're out and about, wrap up well, because it's cold. Not as cold as it has been this week, but there is more snow about most of the country, and it is going to become more frequent as we head into the weekend. So time now for an update on your weather situation, and for that we say good morning, Annie Shuttleworth.